So I think that's a very, I have 3 daughters and I learned from them. One is working with Greenpeace, the other one with UNICEF, and the third one is, or the first one is raising 2 kids, and the way she's doing it, it's just amazing. And I'm really so like humble and grateful for to see them working in the world and making the world a better place. So maybe I did a good job in supporting them to become who they are, but not when it comes to the world altogether.
Very quiet. Nobody want to take any of those points?
And maybe I develop a bit about the world, how the world relates to kids. I think what on the like planetary scale, I think we really have to work on educational system, because now I'm not talking about like Northern Europe, because Northern Europe is getting good in like changing the system, like Finland and Scandinavian countries. But in most of the rest of the world, it's just the whole education system where kids spend very like a lot of time, most of their childhood, is just so like, you know, boxing. And this year, the previous year, traveling a lot, and my son was not schooling. And this year I was like, okay, try the system. You are too free, guy. Try the system just to compare, just to know what it is to be in a box. And so it took him, you know, he was just fighting every day against the system. And what I can say that on the level of his school, he won because changes have started there. Because he was. So what we have as parents to do is just to give kids like chance and support them in fighting, even they're very small, you know, for they can change something. And as grown-ups on our level, we can just go and do those changes. So it's nice, like 2 days ago, he said, Mom, who decides how we educate kids? I'm like, Minister of Education. I have heard yesterday that you can become Minister of Education when you are 20. I will become a Minister of Education. So I think we have to just let them do that, and just from like to work from upside down and from bottom up helping kids, upside down changing by ourselves, you know, the system, and then we meet on some common perfect ground. Yeah.
Yes, that's very good. I'm all for more education. But at the same time, what are we going to teach when we say education? I'm much impressed with your young 80-year-old child who wants to be the Minister of Education. We've had over 70 years, as you just said, in the Western world of education. And the education system post-war was set up basically because when all the men went out to war, women had to go in the factories. They couldn't do even a basic task of measuring something accurately. And they just stood there, and they were given, each task had to be broken down into minute little tasks that everybody could do and then put something together. By the end of the war, or even a few years into the war, women were doing complicated tasks, and some had obviously learned to read and write. So that is one of the biggest things to come out of the war, was that how, if you like, that was a big examination of the condition of humankind, mankind, everybody, as to what we could and couldn't do. and those items which were lacking were redressed. But since then, in the last 70 years, each and every country has used the education system to try and get their own economy better rather than the whole world better. Now, Gertrude seems to think that I probably shouldn't be talking in global terms, but unless we start talking in global terms, the next big test is waiting for us. To put it succinctly in a few words, we are coming to saturation point in population-wise, in what we're producing and what we're wasting. The planet needs cleaning, and we're doing space exploration. So not only have we polluted what's on the earth and the waters, we polluted the space around us. So it's a big tidy up time that is waiting for us, and that can only be done if we have global cooperation. I don't know how we go about that unless we start talking about it. That's the first stage. And the education system has to be the big, yes, Anna?
I think the problem is too much education, not too little. I think that people learn a lot of things that actually they have no use for. Yes, we should learn care for the planet and how to get rid of all the waste and not produce so much waste. All those things are to do with caring for the planet, which is a result. Actually, if you leave kids alone, because now we have the computer which connects people all over the world, kids will teach themselves through the computer. They don't really need to be taught. They can decide for themselves what they need to learn and find it on the computer. And other than that, it's learning really to care for the planet. They are actually much more aware of needing to preserve water, for example, or because that's something which is being spread through computers. That's the sort of knowledge. Yeah, I'm not putting this very well, but my feeling is that if we leave kids alone, they will find the ways to preserve the planet. They won't use up all the, the resources. This need to have something new constantly doesn't come from the kids. It's something which they are fed by the advertising industry and by the big corporations because they want to sell their stuff. So if we, stop those influences and let kids be free. Okay, I'm going to stop there.
So it's good. Can I just ask a few questions to get some clarity here? Because we talk about education and the need for helping the kids in the best way to assist for this cleanup, this global cleanup operation that needs to be done. And as you talked about, Jaswinder, there's been these enormous changes and population growth, changes in culture, globalization. So suddenly it's a very new situation, and that changes everything for education too, because we have to educate in a different kind of environment where everything is dynamic and where we have to somehow find a way to be adaptive to the present needs on the planet and the future needs in the next 10 years and 20 years, 50 years, etc. So are we then talking, when we say education, what do we mean? Do we mean the school buildings? Probably not the school buildings are so important, or the titles, but it's the information that's transferred, right? So it's the knowledge, it's the ideas that are being transferred, and that's what's happening here. So we're transferring ideas now. So this is education. This is a process where we're transmitting thoughts, ideas, and then there's sense. Yeah, you mentioned that, Jaswinder. Common sense. So what's common sense? Sense is sense impressions. Sense impressions is common to us all. So we can see, we can hear, we can smell, we can taste, and we can feel what's happening inside. So those are commonalities, right? And yes, obviously they're very common, and we can all relate to it. So then comes the question of language. Yeah, we need to redefine, renew the language, okay, or make it old again. Does this mean that we need to find a language that relates to sense experience, common sense, something that we can speak more simple, like cleaning up the plastic, like putting the resources to the people who need them, like doing it in a way which doesn't destroy forest areas, which doesn't pollute waters, where we can combine cleaning of plastic with making some use of it, etc., etc., etc. And then it's another issue, which is science, which hasn't been mentioned so much today, but it's a big deal. The empirical science, empiricism is a big ideal in science. That also goes back to this common sense, sense impressions, here and now, what's happening specifically. And when we talk about it and think about it, that's our abstract layer of representations around that. But it's really about here and now. It's really about the action. It's really about resources in space. It's about food, the water, weather, houses, the specifics, the daily specific things. So that seems to be the core of what we're talking about here. That's what I hear. Yeah.
I think if you take the core as something that you feel needs to be handed on to the next generation, then I think we're doing it backwards. What we need to do is to find out what they want to learn, because then when they want to learn it, they will learn it easily. But if we tell them what they should learn, then there's going to be less interest. They're just going to end up these, dummies who are just being told what to do and are being obedient. That's not what we want. We want people who...
Because we don't know, right?
We don't know. Exactly.
Yeah, that's the point. We don't know. We have to figure it out.
Before we get too deep into this argument, let's go back to a very basic thing, and that is to engage with the health side of our beings. Now, I'm not a doctor, but I have a fairly, I'm not an academic, but I have a fairly good command of a couple of languages and a good command, a possible command in another couple. To cut it short, I can engage with most sectors of society. I can go to the hospital, I can go to the civic center and deal with the councillors of the local government. I can engage with the national government. I can engage here. So when we say that education above a certain level is elitism, which is a phrase that's going on currently, I would tend to agree, because there is a cutoff level whereby if you're a graduate, an undergraduate is not allowed to access the same information levels as a graduate or as a professor. Okay, that cutoff level has to disappear. anybody should be able to get that same information as an undergraduate or as a graduate. That cutoff is a glass ceiling as far as I'm concerned. So if I go and talk with my doctor and I have to then go and talk with a surgeon, I need to understand what they're saying in the way that they're saying it and not have to have it interpreted to me. Whereas, again, Anna Harris has pointed out, we have machines today. Great. Today, I can come here, I can go on YouTube, how to dismantle and or reassemble a particular machine. And I can obviously, I watched another particular video on YouTube on how to perform a minor operation. There is a lot of information on the screens today in computers waiting for us to access them. We don't have the time and we don't have the language skills that we ought to be implanting into our youngsters. Certainly, I give way again.
I just said Gertraud was leaving.
Was leaving, so we were just
Yeah.
waving.
Yeah, I think that's great. But what Anna's point, what do you think about that, Jaswinder, that the kids need to also discover for themselves. That comes in freedom again, right? Yay.
Hello, Doug. Are you going now?
What's his name? What's your son's name?
His name is Vladimir.
Vladimir. Would you
Yeah.
ask him if he would like to say something to us?
Vladimir, do you want to share some thoughts about your view to education? Not
really.
Just a few words. We are discussing education here. Say something from your, as who has been taught this today.
We just ask him to say hello to start with. Just ask him to say hello.
He's shy. But maybe he will come later.
Doug, you haven't said a word. Would you like to say something?
Doug, you've been thoughtful today.
Yeah, I've just been processing. Where Alyona, where you sort of started is where I live for the most part, which is the prevailing culture and system has basically beaten our humanity out of us in service to extracting value and exploiting human beings as either customers or cogs in the productive machinery, but not as living things. And I have a deep-seated belief in the huge untapped human generative potential of every man, woman, and child on the planet. But the transformation is going to have to start from within and figuring out how to enable and empower and enfranchise and reconnect and provide the sort of safety and frame for people to reconnect with their humanity and their intrinsic ability and power to contribute, to be of value, and to solve their own and their family and their at a community and the local level, whatever ails, whatever needs to be done. And I sort of see us at a transition point, and the imaginal cells, the people bottom up, are popping up all over the place, all around the world, in different contexts, in different ways, in different forms. But they're all sort of expressing desire for something better and something different. And the systems up top that have been doing what they've been doing for as long as they've been doing it are breaking down. Government, banks, financial system, currencies, countries, all of the structural features of the old paradigm are failing, and fighting like mad to keep themselves going. But it's sort of irrational and blind and primitive at this stage of the game, because even in the face of the most insane consequence, you have situations like guns in the United States. Like, how does that even why is that still a problem? I spent a couple of years working with a teacher in California on this is on the education tip, and he was an academic at one of the big California universities in education, has a PhD, and said, I'm not going to figure out how to fix this until I go behind the chain link fence. And he resigned his university position and became an English teacher in a Central California public high school. And what he did was he said, got to do this differently. And so instead of being a teacher, he sort of reframed himself as guide and facilitator. The students were no longer students, they were learners, and they were part of a learning community. So the classroom, instead of wheel and spokes with the teacher up front or sole source, they really became a learning community, each helping each other and individually. The curriculum wasn't the end destination to test, it became the launching pad for the learning journey. And didn't disrupt or change any of the institutional requirements, but just sort of said to them, it's on you. So it took them, the students went into shock and they were suspicious, and they didn't really buy it or believe it, but within a relatively short period of time, they realized he was serious. Well, long story short, at the end of the first year, above and beyond meeting all of the curricular requirements, 98% sat for AP exams, which was an unprecedented number. And the class, one English class, and what he also did was he opened up the classroom. So it was internet-based, there were class blogs, and there were student blogs, and there were class online affordances and internet connectivity and ability to go anywhere, do anything, reach out. The class by the end of the year had generated 220,000 artifacts. Everything from intra-learning community communications to projects to games to competitions to connecting with outside authors of books and professors at universities and people halfway around the world. And it was just off the charts. It was extraordinary. And I sort of coined the phrase, I called it open source learning. And it was a trim tab, if you think about it, because it wasn't changing. He used all the existing infrastructure and resources. He met all of the institutional requirements of the old order. But he gave the learning community the power and the self-determination and authority to drive their ship. And that meant also he wasn't controlling that. He had to give up any assertion of power, authority, or control. He had to trust, he had to believe in, he had to have faith. And I think on an extrapolated level, we've got to believe and have faith and trust each other on a fundamental level. And get back to heart-centered and feeling-centered mediation of what we're doing and how we're doing it and how we're treating each other in our world. And it's real on a basic and simple level. We shift from a paradigm that's fear-based, which is the institutional cultural imprint, to one that's love-based, and we're a smart enough species to figure it out and turn the ship and change things. But if we can't figure out how to overcome the fear, then we're goners. So covered a lot of ground in this conversation in terms of everybody's contribution. And, my question is, how do we get back to the feeling space, the trust, create the safety on a fast enough basis and on a broad enough scale to sort of have everybody wake up and get busy individually, locally, collectively. So I'm complete.
Yeah, Jaswinder. You're muted, Jaswinder. You have to unmute. Jaswinder, you have to push the mute button, Jaswinder.
I'm sorry, thank you. I thought I had. Thank you, Doug, very much for paraphrasing what I've been trying to say for the last hour or so. Much obliged. The question of fear, again, I don't want to dominate this conversation, but I'll put this as quickly as possible in a few words as possible. Why are the controlling people, if you like, the 1%, so afraid of letting go? They have everything they need, 10, maybe even 100 times over. Why are they so afraid of letting go? Up until recent times, every time there has been a revolution, all the rich people, all the controlling people have ended up dead. Thank you. So we have to promise them that they not only will they not end up being dead, but they can live they're accustomed to till they expire, and that their offspring will obviously be taken care of. I think that has to be made clear right from the start. We're not here to destroy or annihilate anybody. It's time to forgive, forget, and be an egalitarian society. Thank you.
I think that's so awesome, Jaswinder, because it's that fear. If this paradigm continues with this othering and this old language of blame, then that fear is legitimate. So we have to get past that somehow. That just seems to be, we just have to do that. And like Doug, what you mentioned there, that example of those kids that were going to solve a task and they were given freedom and they did extremely well. They became a great team. And if that had been inside of the system that we've been talking about creating, that scenario will be documented for history. So we will see what happened and we can learn from what works. So then we don't have to pretend to know beforehand.
Unfortunately, a lot of other innovations had to come about. The rules of war had to change, society had to change. All that had to take place to bring us to this point. We are at that point of where to make the decision, which way do we need to go? And we cannot deny that certain things, certain situations are waiting for us to clean up. Otherwise, they will destroy us or parts of us. And really, we have to change the education system to suit the circumstance, which is what we've done so far. After that, we can set up a utopia, another 100 years or so.
But if we're going to change the education system, does that mean we have to change our thinking then? We have to, and that's what we're trying to do. Because that's why we're having this conversation, because I want to figure out what is the new paradigm and how can we get there. And yeah, just to briefly, the point about Doug's example is that that's an example of something that we could learn from experience when we do it right. So that's maybe an example of a different paradigm where
different paradigms. I'm glad you mentioned that, Glenn.
Yeah.
I don't know if you're familiar or you've had a look at the Venus Project website or the Money Free website. There are a number of people who are putting these kind of projects online. The Bristol City, which is a city about 150 miles southwest from here, they have a very good Venus Center down there. I've been there once. So I'm waiting for people. I'm waiting to see how many people come on board and have a look and see that. And these various projects are online. And I'm beginning to see, I'm very glad to see cheap houses prefabricated houses being brought on the market, which can be put up in one day, perhaps 2 days. And it's something even I could do.
Doug has to go now, but Doug, did you have something you wanted to say there? Because I saw.
Well, the thing that I wanted to say was that the change is actually happening. It's happening bottom up. It's happening grassroots. It's happening in tens of thousands of expressions and enactions, and I see it as an emergent phenomena. So the industrial, for me, the old and the industrial is the conceit. Gertrude used the word hubris, that we have to design or build what our salvation looks like, as if we have the authority and the intelligence and the brilliance and the power and the capacity to do that. And the reality of David's experiment in the classroom was that that emergence was a product of the co-creation of every student in that room, in real time, experientially, emotionally, spiritually, intellectually, engaged and creating and working together as human beings. And he did 2 years of this, and in the second year he rolled in with a handful of things that he thought would be great because they were so brilliant and so great from the first year, and they laid an egg. And it was like, why did they lay an egg? Well, they laid an egg because the second year class didn't make them. They had no interest in something being inherited. They didn't want hand-me-downs. They wanted to create their own. And their experience in year and their artifact set and orientation was completely different than the first year. So the truth is, as human beings, I want to own what I'm contributing to from a discretion place, from a choice and decision place, that this is co-created with the people I'm working with, and my return of value and satisfaction, acknowledgement, recognition, appreciation, whatever, is based on my contribution being valuable and meaningful in that context. And that's an experiential thing, not just a productive thing. So everybody around the world needs to do that. They need to be able to have the opportunity to do that and own it. I gotta go. It was great. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
May I a little bit extend that idea that was said by Doug? What I was also thinking, like at the beginning, we even created a nonprofit, New Era World Architects, NEWA, and we were thinking of creating a new society. Let's plan, and then we just started like thinking about that, and then we got to the idea, to the thought, to the understanding that there were so many prefabricated, pre-designed, like socialism, capitalism, like everything that was pre-designed actually never happened, because this something the same about Venus. I observed development of Venus for many years already, and I just realized that you design something for the future, but you are in now. You cannot predict. There are many like black swans going on. Even we change it within ourselves. So what I truly agree with Doug, that we should shift from like future picture, like socialism, it promised something that we never reached here in Russia and Soviet Union. Capitalism promised something that never was available to the majority of population. And so what we actually need to do is forget about like building the future. And and I think I observed that now there is some kind of rise of Buddhism in the world, because it teaches a lot of very important moments of like being in now, living in now. And what Doug is saying is co-creating in the process, valuing the process itself rather than like some future goal. I think we in general have to shift to that way, that creating a piece right in time, right here, with any new circumstances that will come and go, because like I call it constantly changing fluidity. We need like accept that constantly changing fluidity on like major scale. And for example, what I teach like my son, I teach that. I teach like martial arts. I teach to not to like fix some things, but values of being true to your heart and not do bad things, not even. And what is bad that you feel with your heart, that I refer to importance of feeling with your heart and choosing. And I think, again, like returning that we need to go to the simple, right in time and now, co-creating like the moment.
Understood. I'm with you there. But at the same time,
Jaswinder, you're muted again. You have to unmute. Jaswinder, you have to unmute on the button.
I'm sure this time, I'm sure I clicked it. Maybe I clicked it twice. Sorry about that. Alyona, again, I agree with everything you said there, with only one small proviso, and then I'm done for the evening. We live in the moment, but there is nothing to say we can't plan for the future. You're planning for your son's future, so you're inputting into him. So you're doing both together. Thank you.
I like that. It's like the future is in the present, in a way. It's like here in the present, we're thinking about the future, but it's happening here, and it should have a creative effect. I like that. Yeah. Sam, you've been thoughtful today. Do you have anything?
I'll add one thought, and that is that the conversation we're having here, regardless of whether we agree or disagree, regardless of whether we listen or whether we speak, this is almost the solution already, okay? The bigger problem, it seems to me, is to get people into the conversation. There's a number of people who are not in this conversation. So there's a number of people who have never heard of us. That's understood. There's about 200 people who know about this and yet don't come to these conversations for whatever reason, okay? And then to actually get into these conversations and to have the curiosity and the generosity to listen is over half the solution, in my opinion, okay? Too many, I think, come with predisposed ideas of this is the solution, I want everybody else to understand my solution. I think what we've been trying to create in this group, in this GCC, is we need to understand how each person brings a unique aspect that can add to the solution, if there is one, okay? Whether it's emergent, whether it's designed, whether it's even just, biomimicry. So I think where I am thinking, just as I listen, is I'm wondering, how do we get new voices? Jaswinder, you're a very recent voice. Alyona, you are the most recent voice in these conversations. And if we're setting out to do what we originally did in September of last year, which is to even think about global governance models, how do we get into that conversation, listening to people, co-creating with people, really creating something that's better than any proper subset of us could create on our own, whether it's an individual or two or three, right? We have to figure out how to do this in such a way that every new person improves what it is we're doing. And if we can do that, then I think we're on our way towards a governance model, let alone a global governance model. If we can't do that, if we can't get people into the conversation, or if we bring people to conversation and they don't feel heard, or they don't feel that their pieces are being co-created along with the rest, that's also not the solution. So that's where my mind goes, okay, when I'm listening to this. I'm listening, how do we get voices into this conversation, and how do we listen well enough so that next week we haven't forgotten what we said here, or this week we haven't forgotten what Jaswinder said a month ago. Over.
I agree with you there wholeheartedly. Just myself, in the time that I've come to these meetings, been on my mind as well. And I think I shall actively engage now in inviting people to these meetings, now that I can see we're having regular meetings and I know when they are and how to engage with the meetings. I will make it my business to try and engage as many people as possible. Thank you for bringing that up. Over.
Sam, I just wonder, what do you think, how many other groups do you think are having similar conversations to these?
Hundreds, if not thousands, if not millions. I mean,
yeah.
To give you an example, in Palo Alto, where I used to live, I've been in a conversation like this every Wednesday evening since 2011. So that's 7 years now.
Was that the Amigos?
No, that was what's called the Serious Conversations group. Then there's another group of 300 people in the larger Bay Area, not just Palo Alto, called Next Now. They only meet quarterly, unfortunately. They don't meet every week. Then, ever since 2012, I've been meeting with probably about a dozen people called the Amigos. And the problem is we all are brilliant and want everyone else to understand our own ideas. And we don't yet have the time to understand everyone else's ideas. That's smart people problem number one, as far as my rant goes, okay? That's the smart people problem.
May I add to this?
Yeah, go ahead.
What I started with, that people are now so much obsessed with just conversation itself and just with debates itself, and they forget about what are they doing this for. Just to chat, that's one thing. Yeah, we can just share ideas. But and why I brought up the musical festivals, especially that musical festival of avant-garde music, where people would create together in real time amazing pieces. Yeah, and if you are in the Bay Area, there is a huge community in the Bay Area. I can introduce you to some of them. Amazing artists. There are a lot of living like in Oakland mostly. And
by the way, I used to be in the Bay Area. I'm in Washington State now, sorry.
Okay. So I think what we have to do is, I would, for our next meeting, I would bring up some kind of, to the table, some kind of idea of experiment that we would like, we can work on like mental plane, you know, we can build something on the mental plane. We shouldn't like talk about this. We can just go deeper like into our like consciousness and just imagine that we are building, but we won't build with like hands in physical world, but we would build like some something. We should think about what we should build. And so we would like do this right in the moment. So for example, there is very interesting, if you are familiar to Russian science fiction, there are brothers Strugatsky. And so recently I was like, oh, they wrote together. How is it possible to write one book together? I really wanted to ask one of the brothers, but I was late, he died. And so it would be, we can actually try to write down, but with words, you know, a piece. So where one started, one develops, you know, so we don't talk about ideas, we do something. So maybe we will do experiment like this and like co-create in real time.
So by the way, Alyona, many things you said that I wanted to respond to. Number one, I'm actually a co-author of a book. About 8 of us actually wrote a book together. And we actually did this, it was called, I think it's basically how to be a VP of engineering in Silicon Valley. And we published this about 8 or 9 years ago. But we did do this writing exercise as a group, not the traditional way where, hey, you write this, you write this, you write this, you write this. We did it much differently. We said, we are all together going to talk about one topic every Tuesday night. And then after that discussion, one of us actually writes that up. And then the next Tuesday, we all get together, talk about another topic. And then someone else writes that up. And we also review what the other person wrote up the previous week. So that's how we did for 2 or 3 years, writing a book together rather than separately. So that's point number one. Point number two is I am a musician. It turns out I play violin. I love playing violin. My greatest joy in life, I say to some people, they don't believe me, I think it's actually better than sex, is chamber music. Chamber music is really wonderful way to co-create something with other musicians. And that's something that just, you know, gives you a rush and gives you endorphins and gives you oxytocin like nothing else. And in addition to being a violinist and a chamber music aficionado, I also for over a decade conducted a children's orchestra in Palo Alto. So I've actually directed, you know, groups play Mahler, Gershwin, Beethoven, Corelli, Mozart, Haydn, all of those sort of things. And so I wrote a blog about 10 years ago called Everything I Learned About Management, I Learned as an Orchestra Conductor.
Yeah.
And it's literally true. Okay, it's literally true. And then the third thing I want to tell you, you may have picked this up from GCC, but we have 4 meetings going on every week, okay? This one, the Thursday one, is free-flowing. Any topic, anybody, any format, completely free, no leader, okay? The Sunday one, Doug leads. It's called unblocking. In other words, what are those things that keep us from doing what we want to do, either individually or as a group? Tuesdays, I moderate a conversation that's about what it is we want to construct. So it's about, you know, what is, I mean, in the US, we call it barn raising. You know, the whole village comes together and builds a barn, you know, when a new family moves in. So what is that barn that we want to create? And where's the foundation? What are the windows? Who brings the wood? Who brings the tools? Who brings the, you know, smokestack? All those sort of things, you know, who does the design? So that's a barn raising conversation. And then Friday, Tammy moderates one, which is called Focus. And I think what she's been doing is experimenting with really going deep into 1 or 2 people's works or ideas. So, you know, she's done that with a number of people now. So it's not quite as free format, but it's just deep dive into 1 or 2 people. Anybody is free to call a meeting, set a meeting, schedule it, announce it, and then people will show up, okay, in this conversation. It's just that right now there's 4 of them. And as you notice, they don't happen to be very short meetings. You know, this one started over 2 hours ago. And so it turns out most of them are at least 90 to 120 and sometimes longer minutes. But I wanted to at least, you know, give you that sense because we don't yet really know what we're doing, but we're getting a sense. Okay? So the unblocking says, what's holding us back? The barn raising says, where do we want to go? You know, the free format is, what do we want to do next and how do we want to do it? And then the focus dives are, how do we introduce new ideas into this group in a very deep way? So that's just the way it's structured right now. completely free for improvement and revision and augmentation. I just want to emphasize that, okay?
Good. I like
so,
it.
I know I haven't been saying very much. I wanted, you to feel like, you were being heard, you're being welcomed. I hope you feel that way, both of you, Jaswinder, Alyona. And so I've just been trying to listen. I've been taking some notes. And eventually, you'll hear more from the rest of us. But I at least wanted you to have this forum and this opportunity.
Yeah, it's been great. It's been great listening to you. It's been so interesting. And just the fact that you came here, you brought in totally new perspectives. And it's been amazing. I just wonder one thing, though, Sam, because you asked this about how do we get more people to participate in conversations, because that hasn't really been my focus. I have some others that I could have invited, but like, how many do we want? So for example, if there's like 20 people in a conversation, that's one type of conversation, and so it's a different thing than 10 or 5 or yeah. So
Glenn, let me answer it this way, okay? If you feel that you can invite someone and they can experience what we have here and what we do here and not be dismayed, they could be dismayed by, hey, what are they doing? I don't understand. Or what have they produced? They've produced nothing. I don't understand what they produce. Or how do they do things? There's no charter. There's no rules of engagement. If they don't get dismayed by any of this, then I think they're welcome, right? But those people who expect a lot more to be done, a lot more to have already been written, a lot more to have already been decided, and if they see that that doesn't exist, they probably will wait. I know there's over 200 people waiting now before they come into this conversation. But we are really trying to figure out, how do we even make agreements?
Yeah.
So we are experimenting with, how do we even know who's in this group? How do we make agreements? How do we change decisions? How do we retain our group memory? Even things like, how do we schedule meetings? So it seems so elementary. It seems so stupid to be worried about those problems. But underneath all those problems are the principal atomic elements of how we want to be with each other.
Yeah.
We want to make assumptions.
Resonance.
Whether we want to, impose solutions on others, whether we want to use other people's ideas to revise what we do, those are all very basic. And it feels very, very slow. But my belief is, if we get this right, then we'll have a good foundation. Right not meaning it's perfect, but right meaning that we take a learning position, a constantly improving position, and a constantly inclusive position. If we can,
sometimes distraction is also good.
Yes, destroy the bad so that it can improve. I'm completely there, okay?
Yeah.
I have no problem with discomfort, by the way. Some people come here and are uncomfortable. I think if you're not uncomfortable, then you're not being pushed to your boundaries yet in some way, okay? I'm not saying everybody needs to be uncomfortable all the time, but I think if momentary discomfort pushes you away, then that's going to be a problem, because there's going to be many points, where someone might actually be uncomfortable. And I think we've seen some of that already. If you go back to some of our conversations, they're all recorded, by the way, you'll see some of those moments. Anyway, I've probably gone on way too long, but I sort of saved everything for the end here.
I want to say about being worried of how fast, how far, how broad. I think we shouldn't worry about that, because once we worry about that, we some kind of crave some result. And once you crave some result, you lose your hard path, You want that. You don't like the process. And I think what we should follow is just balancing with what you have, accepting what we may have and what we may not have, and just follow the way and just sensing every new step where to put your foot.
Yeah, and we have to take one step at a time, one way or another.
Yeah, and also if we grow fast, it will be actually a distraction, because it is nice to have organic growth, because, for example, now there are just 3 of us. and we are building some kind of solid thing. And yeah, but I don't know if Tammy is listening to us. And so, and once some solid structure is being built, and every new income will more likely resonate to our common resonance, because our magnitude is like already like, as we imagine that once we're solid, we create some kind of distributed consciousness, and we create larger and stronger magnitude of our like field of resonance. And when we're solid, every new will come in. And it's very important that there are not more than, like you mentioned, 10%. If it will be like once come more than 10% of existing amount of people, it will be like again, like we will start from the scratch again, and maybe it will be the way to destruction in general, you know, of the whole process. So that's why we have to love what we have.
Yeah,
and we just enjoy, like now there are 3 of us and we are enjoying.
I mean, this group already has more than 260 members. Is it something like that? So it's been a steady growth so far. And I mean, that's already a number. But it seems that what really matters, we find out the process, which is really good, so that it deserves to be scaled.
It will, if it deserves, you know?
Yeah, if it deserves, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just have one thought to what you said, Sam, about making decisions. Could we say that what this is, the collaborative commons, is people and groups of people around certain projects, and that the decisions are made when all the people of a given project agrees that yes, I want to do this, I want to be a part of this, then the decision is made for those people. And if someone isn't interested in it, or they don't have time for it, then that decision doesn't apply to them. And so they are then not in that group around that project, but there are like multiple levels of groups and many projects. But could that be a distributed model for decision making, that it's about teams of people who actually agree wholeheartedly that yes, I want to go into this, and about what next, maybe that's open, but as a starting point, and are really motivated behind that. Because it seems to me that if everyone in a team isn't motivated, then the decision just isn't ready yet for that team. So then the decision or the way has to be refined. But if there comes, yeah.
I want to bring here the approach. Once, like many years ago, I have read about how the hackers group communicate. So they, for example, there are no leaders, there are even no personalities in hackers group. And so I think that this approach is perfect one. First of all, it's very organic. And so they put like ideas on the list, and then those ideas that are truly resonant for the moment and for those who heard or read it, it would just be like grabbed and like developed. Those ideas that are weak and not resonant, they just destroy, they just die, and nobody suffers of something is dying. If it is dead, then it should be dead, you know. And talking about like groups and agreement, I think what our society is stuck is where it is stuck is we need too much decision making. We spend more time for decision making rather than making, you know. And so I think what we also like continuing that hacker approach, why it is important to have like natural growth, because natural growth will give us opportunity to build some solid group of those who already agree with each other and already resonate. And so it won't be destroyed if someone leave, you know, some new would come, then leave. We wouldn't be like worry about that, because we still keep going. If there would be like more people coming, then we will go faster. If people would leave, we will go slower. Why not? Then we have to go slower right now, you know?
Yeah.
Well, let me share one observation. Alyona, I like the model that you described. I am actually quite familiar with open source models, and it's not quite as free from personalities and structure as I believe I heard, okay?
No, I have talked about hackers.
Yeah, even hackers. I mean, hackers basically created the open source model. And I'm a software engineer from way back, you know, so I've got several decades being around that community. There's implicate order in the hacker community that I think if you even look at that versus nature, nature has implicate order in the DNA that exists, okay? So we look at the way things grow, and it looks like they're free to grow, but there's a lot already there within the DNA that determines what the capabilities are and what the possibilities are. I think software takes a similar form. There are visions and structures and architectures in software where if a newcomer comes, if they don't conform to that, then what happens is they fork. They basically split into two separate projects, and that's okay. But at least it's not the same thing, okay? So we can take a very similar pattern here. In fact, you know, I have a little rant I call confederation before federation. When groups get together, I think a loose form of support for each other, a loose form of informing each other what we're each doing, and a loose form of everyone doing their own thing is perfect for the beginning. And over time, we can then say, oh, well, these two things might have a more tight alignment. They can create something else. They can then work together. But I think assuming that we're going to create one thing out of a randomly assembled group of people, too challenging. I've tried that too many times. It really is trying to do too much in a too short series of steps. And then this other idea of slowing down to go faster, I think is a key idea. A false sense of urgency will make us do the wrong thing. It'll make us cut corners. It'll make us not consider the certain steps that will have implications in the future. And it's a very difficult thing for impatient people. And it's particularly difficult for people who say, if we don't do something now, we're going to run out of water in 20 years. You know, it's hard to believe that and yet still do the right steps, the right process in order to really build the right collective capability. It's a balance. And
I think we should master some kind of superposition, being in now, but also like scanning the future possibilities.
Yeah. Yes, that is a common pattern that I think really will apply quite nicely.
And we're also doing
that's a possible topic for our Tuesday conversation as well.
Yeah, but also saying like we're also doing it now, so even if we're impatient, we're actually doing a big part of it by just having the conversations. If the problem is that the thinking has been stuck in old paradigms and that we need to open a space for a different conversation with real interest and listening and thinking together and having an open mind to really learn something new, then if we do that in these conversations, then as far as I can tell, we are doing the change, and we're doing the change at just about the most relevant level, and we're focusing on real essentials by just this channeling of energy. So that might be a way to calm down this impatient inner voice that wants, oh, gotta move on. Well, we're actually doing it. And like you say, Alyona, if we can find the superposition where we can be here in the present, act in the present, have good conversations in the present, but also see that larger horizon. And then from that, we can build visions for how we can move forward in a better direction. Then that also can emerge from the conversations. So, yeah, since you fell out there, but yeah, just so I just wanted to mention that too, that yeah, about going fast while going slow, like just the fact that we're here. Well, that's change. I mean, it's important work. So, what happened with Alyona there? Did she just?
It appears like she dropped. But I want to make one more statement before I close, and that is, Jaswinder, last time you were here, you said that you would be back if you felt you were heard. And I don't yet feel that we have convinced you that you were heard. We haven't got the infrastructure to really remember. We haven't got the infrastructure to really connect. We don't have the infrastructure to recall. I've wanted for us to come up with ways to create that. I would say that if you are still patient, those are still things that I, and I think many others, want as well. But I just want to recall that statement that you made when you were here last time. Over.
You have to unmute again, Jaswinder.
That's it. So there are two controls and I keep mixing them up. Thank you again. I do remember that statement. I don't remember exactly what I said. Yes, my feelings are, listening to this group, in pretty much the same way as yours, Sam, that we do a fair amount of talking, and we've got the GCC and the GSS. Again, there are a lot of other people doing the same sort of thing, and I have been actively involved with a lot of the communities around this area for a number of years, as well as doing other things as well. And there are a lot of, I feel, groups who get together with the best intentions, and those intentions stay there for a number of years, and people come in and drift off, and you might get the odd one or two projects actually coming on board. City of Sanctuaries up and running. The interfaith, which has been running for 40 years, is still running. So it's produced offshoots, and there are other programs which are ongoing. And as I was listening here to young Glenn and Alyona, it reaffirmed my sort of ongoing that, yes, I really need to get out and about and more active again, as well as coming to these groups. And I think that because we are raising these conversations, Sam, that we are getting closer and closer to internet collaboration to actually be doing something. How that'll come about, we'll see in the near future. Yes, Glenn.
No, I just waved to Alyona's child there. Yeah, it's great if you can come to these conversations, because I feel it's energy. It's like learning. Every time I come here, it's like I reset my mind, and it brings back the motivation to contribute. The talking is the walking in one sense. If it's the right presence, if we have a good presence and we learn and listen and explore, it's like this opens the mind space a lot. So it's very valuable, just the act of attending, I guess you could say, or being just thinking together that maybe we can trust that when we do that, then the understanding will grow in its own pace. And if we can be willing to try things as experiments, I love that idea, and see projects as experiments, then the process of learning together, it can continue. So we act, we do things, we do that anyway, but it's this ongoing open conversation where we can share what we really think and try to clarify thoughts and ideas and try to put it into words and really try to be interested and listen. And then out of this, it sort of grows a new understanding. And that's, to me, that seems to be real important work in itself, especially if we can do it well. And as you say, Jaswinder, out of that, there's can be all these offshoots of more specific projects, and we can take different roles. But yeah, I feel that the conversational level of the totality of all these conversations ongoing, the sharing of impressions, ideas, that's sort of the intelligence level or layer around, and it sort of lives its own world, its own life. But if that's good, then I trust good things will probably come out of it. So that's where I am now, at least, to just try to show up and really try to think clearly and learn, and then we'll see where it moves from here.
I'm going to have to leave soon, but let me leave with one last thought that I think has been emerging at least on Facebook and coming to prominence. And that is, the problem is not one of disagreement. The problem is one of contempt. If we have people who are not even willing to listen to others, then there will never be a conversation. There will never be a dialogue. And that contempt has been fed by the media. You know, the powers that want control want us to be completely separated, for us to be angry with each other, for us to have contempt for each other. So we think that the other side is stupid, or they're Republicans, or they believe in guns, or whatever the thought is. And it's a contempt problem, which eliminates the possibility for conversation and dialogue. I think we have to overcome that.
Yeah.
No matter what the disagreement is, if you can't come to the table and have a conversation, then you're part of the problem.
Exactly.
If you have that consciousness, then that's a better way to actually be receptive and to invite these conversations and to invite others to these conversations, okay? Regardless of what your position is on any given single issue. I think I'm probably done for today.
Yeah, you nailed it, Sam. Yeah, that just seems spot on. Yeah, that was great.
I'm done for today as well. Thank you very much for all your company. Look forward to the next one. Bye.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Actually, before we end so quickly,
Quickly.
let's give some chance to make a closing statement. You know, I don't want to just say 5 seconds, we're all gone. Would anybody like a chance to make a closing statement? Alyona, how was this experience for you as the first time?
I really enjoyed it because actually I tried to participate in something like this and or to start something like this, but I was never able, to find that resonance, because the people who were with me, they were they were not able, you know, for that co-creation. And I was very close to some kind of disappointment that, is it maybe my utopia? And when I saw one of your previous videos, I was like, wow, that's what I was looking for. And so I really enjoy it, and I hope that we will co-create something beautiful, organic, and long-lasting.
I'm glad to hear that. Please let me know separately if you like. Please let me know which video that was that you watched. I know there's many of them. Okay.
Oh,
Yeah,
I even posted a comment under it.
Yeah, okay,
and
I remember that one.
And you liked it.
I remember that one. Yes. Yeah. Glenn, Jaswinder, any closing comment, statement?
No, it's been a pleasure being here. It's been good exercise. I'm had a very good conversation. It's a pleasure to meet an intellectual like yourself. Raises my thinking level. And I am of the opinion that between this GSS, GCC, and one or two others that escape my mind at the moment. And as you say, and you've made me more aware of other groups in other places, and I know Reddit and Pinterest and other social media are coming online, and I'm trying to have a look at them as well. I'm really, really thinking seriously that the global awareness level, the collective global awareness level, has increased exponentially in the last couple of decades. 1996, internet started with the old 56K modems. You remember those, no doubt.
And I remember the even slower ones. They had a 1200 baht one time.
Yeah, downloading a meg or two in half an hour. You used to think, yeah, that's terrific. But we have come a long way.
Sorry about that.
You've been in the software industry, and I've been in the hardware and the software industry. And I'm really, really pleased. In the last few weeks, I was despondent post-Christmas in that I did not see the results I kept asking for since 3 years now. I have been asking this question, not personally, but externally. Where can I see the benefit of the last 70 years of education? We've had 70 years of peace in Europe, and we've had over 70 years of education. Where are the signs of intelligence? And people used to look at me in blank and say, if you're looking for intelligence, it's that away. And in the last 6 weeks, that question has been answered, albeit it took a horrendous event. But I can now see a generation coming along whose thinking power, whose talking power is at the level I expected it to be 3 years ago. It may be late, it may not be late, I don't know. But it's here. And I'm ever so glad, and I'm very glad to make acquaintance of everybody here. And we're all living and learning, and we're all looking forward to move forward. I very much so. I may be coming up to 65 this year. I have no intention of retiring. In fact, I think I ought to do more exercises, become fitter, and actually do something physical to get involved in something called the homeless program, which I've mentioned before. I'm not sure whether you were at that meeting, Sam, but I have mentioned it at one of the meetings. And I've mentioned today we can put houses together in a day or two. And I really think I need to take that downtown to the council offices and throw it up and see if somebody listens. Thank you for your time.
Oh, thank you, Jaswinder. And that was awesome. I'll just say, should I say a few, what do you say, Sam, was it?
Please do, Glenn. And I also want to invite Tammy in case she's still there.
Yeah, did she go away or? I'll just be brief, but yeah, thanks. It's been awesome having both of you here and everyone here. Yeah, the way I see it now is that there seems to be a big transition for whole of humanity. There's no question about it. And it's a new generation, and they're incredibly talented, and it's going to be a radical change one way or another. So I can only try to do my best to try to contribute so it's as positive a change as possible. It will be radical change one way or another, but I want to contribute to something positive. And as far as I can tell, when people from around the world join their minds like this, and if we can create that conversation space where people are really heard and respected, and where everything that comes in can be made valuable, then I think we're on an incredibly promising track, and that global awareness, the raising of the global awareness will continue. And I also see in many ways that there is a totally new awareness that's never been here before. And there's also, of course, various other changes and dangers, etc. So it seems to be a chaotic situation which can be formed, and where everything I think about probably matters in ways I can't see. So I guess I don't have to speculate whether the world's going in the right way or wrong way. And I've done those speculations over and over again, and it just makes me tired, and I've never reached any solution. So what I want to do is to try to find out how I can contribute to something useful, how I can somehow be an action in the world which can contribute to a positive development in a situation with enormous possibilities in all directions, good, bad, and everything in between, and horrific and magnificent, and all the futures are possible. But like, how could I contribute to the best actual future, and how could I ask the question of how could we contribute to the best possible future for all of mankind? That is the big issue that I want to continue exploring, and that's what I also feel that we're exploring in every one of these calls. And it's the process also informs me, and I inform the process, and then it's this interactive thing that happens. So but the only thing I can really take responsibility for is my presence and my energy and what I bring in. So I try to bring in something interesting, and I try to see try to listen to the room and where the commonalities are, etc. I feel that already, it's a lot of new knowledge which has just emerged in this group. So very, very interesting work, but also overwhelming. so that's another aspect. Yeah. So I think I'll just leave it at that, and thank you all for another mind-blowing session of communication.
So Tammy, are you still there? Thanks, Len. Maybe not. Anyway, I had characterized this Thursday call as a leaderless call, but it really started as an opportunity for each of us to get to know each other. So I think, rather than calling it leaderless, it's still kind of this exploratory introduction and getting to know each other kind of feel to it. So we haven't actually named it, but I think that's what we've been doing. So I just wanted to give you that little characterization of Thursdays as well. Anyway, with that, thank you very much. Hopefully we'll see you in the future conversation.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
What is the right time then?
In California, where in the West Coast time where I am right now, it's 10:47 a.m.
No, because the right posted on Facebook was one time later than you started.
Tammy corrected it this morning, so she corrected it after I noticed it.
Okay.
You should find it now. Okay.
Okay.
There's one tomorrow, but that's a little later. The conversation tomorrow.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. It's actually going to start Thursdays is 5 p.m. Central European time.
Okay.
Okay.
So, thanks everyone.
Mm-hmm. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Mm-hmm.